Good morning. As we go to the Chumash, the Chitas of today, we start with the Chumash of the day. We are holding in the book of Pinchas, the book of Bamidbar, chapter 28, verse number 1. God spoke to Moshe saying, Tzavis b'nei Yisrael, command the Jewish people of Amaita Aleim and tell them, Ex karbani lachmi liishai, my offering, my food for my offering. Reach nechayach, which is a pleasing smell. Tishmanu, you should watch. Lahakir leave a maida that you should bring it in its appointed time. Rashi says, Ma amal amayla yifkad Hashem. What it says before, when Moshe Rabbeinu asked God that he should have and appointed a leader, he said, the Eibush said to him, before you command me regarding my children, Israel, command my children regarding me. What about me? This is the analogous to a princess who was about to depart from the world and instructed her husband about her children. And what does the king say? Thank you very much that you care about your children. What about who's going to care for me? Who's going to make me breakfast every morning? Who's going to do this for me? Before you instruct me of them, instruct them about me. Make sure your children remember their father. Karbanis, that's why the karban, the first thing will be is to bring a carbon every morning. Bring the Eibush to breakfast, and so to say in the afternoon, bring him his dinner. Rabbani zehadam, this is the blood. Lachmi elei modem, this is the sacrificial parts. As the verse says, v'hikta hakayin amizbecha, that the kohen will bring parts of the animal on the altar. Lechem ishay, it's an offering of fire offering to God. The ishay, which are put in the fire of my altar. Tishmanu. What does it mean, Tishmanu? You shall take care that the Kehanim and the Leviim and the Israelites, all of them shall be part of this offering. Make sure that the Israelites stand there, that when you bring the Talmud in the morning and the Talmud in the afternoon, you make sure to have every part of Jews in there, that there's a Kohen doing the Avodah, there's the Leviim singing, and there's the Yisrael standing there at the time of the carbon. Every morning. This was a Moed every morning. The Beis Hamikdash started with the carbon Talmud. Verse 3, and you should tell them this is the offering you shall bring to the Lord. You had to bring 2 unblemished lambs in the first year. Talmud, 2 every day, 1 in the morning, 1 in the afternoon. Talmud, an everlasting burnt offering. That's the 2 davenings that we do, Shachris and Mincha, corresponding to these 2 offerings. Rashi says, this is a command, this is an obligation to the Bezdin, the court. That's why the court established Mincha, Shachris, and Mincha. Shnayim layayim kipshute. Simple as it's taught to simple meaning. The 2 sacrifices were offered every day. Primarily, however, it came to teach us that they should be slaughtered opposite the sun. It's also known as Yom, continual sacrifice in the morning to the west, and the one in the afternoon to the east of the rings set on the floor of the temple courtyard. So you had to bring him every morning. The first one, you started from sunrise, and the second one on sunset. The first offering should be brought in the morning. The second lamb in the evening. Afternoon. Rashi says, even though it already states in the portion to Tzaveh, it's already brought down this. This shall you should offer on the altar 1 lamb and offer in the morning. That it was instruction for the days of the investors. You might the only thing that's talking about when they became Kehanim. We're here. This is a command that every morning, which Mashiach will come and will have the Beis Hamikdash. Every morning we'll bring the carbon Talmud, Shal Shachris, the morning offering and afternoon offering. And you have to bring a ephah of fine flour for a mincha, for a meal offering. Belula b'Hashem, and mixed with oil. Kosis, mixed. The v'yisahin with a hint of crushed olive oil. What does it mean? Seilas and mincha. Minchas nesachim. This is the offering of the libation of the wine also that came with the offering. Oilas tamer asur b'Sinai. This is the continual offering, the one that was offered up at Mount Sinai Ishe lerech nechoyach, as a sanctus, as a pleasing smell. Isha Hashem, a fire to God. Now she says, what does it mean, Har Sinai? Where do we get over here to Har Sinai? So now she says, but the same thing what's mentioned in the previous Rashi, that you brought in the Mei HaMiluyim, in the days of the vestures, when they invested Aaron and his family and his sons into the Kohuna. That was done on Mount Sinai when they built the Mishkan. Continual burnt offering is compared to the continual offering of Mount Sinai, the one offered before the giving of the Torah, which is written. Also, they brought a carbon before even the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. Also, he put the blood in the basin. This teaches us that the continual offering requires the vessel for the blood. They had a vessel which they put the blood into it, and they sprinkled the blood on the mizbeach. And together with that, you had to make it a libation. The vias a hin, 1/4 a hin of wine, like echa, to be poured with one of the lambs. Ba'kodesh, it's holy. Nesach sheichel aranai, it's a strong wine to God. Now she says, "V'niska yayin," the wine. Ba'kodesh hasech, they shall be poured on the altar. Nesach sheichel, intoxicating wine. The wine that they used to make in those days, today it's only 5% wine. Those times it was extremely strong wine. It was called intoxicating seichel. It's intoxicating wine because it was powerful wine. Prat liyayim migita, just comes to exclude wine straight from a wine press, which is not fermented. So this was strong, very strong wine. It's like in the second line, you should make offer in the afternoon. Like the offering that you like the same meal offering in the morning, ukeniskay, and it's libation of wine. Tasi you shall do. It's a fire offer, the spirit of sanctification, God. Again, now she explains the reach nechayach, what means a pleasing smell. God knows concept of a pleasing smell, but it's a gratification for me that I spoke, and my will is carried out. That's what Rashi explained reich nechayach already in the book of Leviticus. B'yom Shabbos, in the day of Shabbos. Now we're going to go through all the sacrificial offerings. This parsha is the most read parsha in the Torah. We read it every Yontiv. We read it every Rosh Chodesh. I'm going to read it this Shabbos. And on the day of Shabbos, you should bring 2 unblemished lambs. And it should be brought together with 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a meal offering, mixed with oil, v'niskay, and its wine libation. Oila Shabbos v'Shabbatay. This is the burnt offering of each Shabbos. Al oila satamid v'niskay. That's besides the daily offering. That's why you say musav on Shabbos, because there's a musav. A musav means extra. So there's an oila of the morning, like every day. That's shacharis. And on Shabbos, we have musav because there's an extra offering. So to Rosh Chodesh, you have musav. So to Yontiv, you have musav. Where there's a musav, musav means, the word musav means extra. So on these days, you have an extra offering, and therefore you have a musav, an extra prayer in your davening. Oila Shabbos Shabbate, but not the burnt offering of this Shabbos on another Shabbos. For if you did not offer one on Shabbos, you might think you bring 2 offering in the next Shabbos. No. Therefore, Torah tells us on this Shabbos, every Shabbos has its own offering. If you missed it, you missed it. Alayla Satomim. So that's what she says. I just use that word. Elu Musafim. These are the Musaf offerings. Musaf. Additional Musaf. Besides the offering that was done every day, that you brought every day, 1 lamb in the morning and 1 lamb in the afternoon. The additional sacrifice may be offered only between 2 continual offerings. That means the first sacrifice of the day was the tamid. The last sacrifice of the day was a tamid, again, the mincha tamid. The afternoon, whatever you did in between was extra. But you couldn't bring the Shabbos sacrifice before the Eilos tamid, before the daily offering. Okay, verse 11. Again, you have to add another sacrifice. Takriva oila Hashem, you have to bring an oila to God. Two young bulls, bayil echad, one ram, and 7 lambs. Shiva. 7 lambs in the first year, unblemished. Together with all these sacrifices on Rosh Chodesh, you need to bring 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a meal offering, mixed with oil. The para echa to the first each bull. And you have to bring 1/10 of a fine flour meal offering with oil for the ram, for each ram. Now she says, in the case of libation brought with a bull, for thus they were fixed in the portion dealing with libation, as we'll soon see. And 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil, as a meal offering, for each lamb, 7 lambs. It's a burnt offering of a spirit of satisfaction to God. And now you go to the wine libation. A half a hin, which is an amount, a Torah amount for each bull. And 3/3 of a hin for each ram. But a vias a hin, and 1/4 of a hin for each and every lamb. This is the Oila offering of the Chodesh B'Chodesh, the monthly sacrifice of Rosh Chodesh, the Chodesh Hashanah, to the months of the year. Again, Rashi says, what does it teach us? However, once this day passes, you cannot bring Rosh Chodesh the next day. Rosh Chodesh is the day when Rosh Chodesh is, and there you can't make up for it. Avazmane batal karbona, as the statement goes. You missed the situation, and you lost the opportunity. Verse 15. See, it is a mechalachata, so you need to make one male goat for a sin offering. Hashem to God. Alayla satamid. This is besides the daily offering. Yasa, you should do viniskai and its libation. Now she says, all the additional offerings of goats were brought to atone for defiling the sanctuary and its holy sacrifice. As outlined in the tractate of Shavuos, the young male goat brought on the first day of the month differs insofar that with regard to it, the scripture says, to the Lord. It was brought chatas laHashem. It's an interesting expression. It's a chatas, it's a forgiving offering to God. What does that mean? This is a beautiful medrash. The medrash says, this teaches us that the number one, that it teaches us that it atones for the case where there's no awareness. That means only God knows. Either before entering the temple or eating sacrificial food, or after the sin had been committed. The Holy One is aware of this one. The only one who knows that you're impure maybe is God himself. He derived the law for the young male goats from this one. In Agada, it's actually for God. The atonement is for God. The God in the Medrash, it says that you need to bring me an atonement that I made the moon smaller on this day. So God made the moon smaller than the sun, which he embarrassed the sun, so it's the moon, by making it smaller. And therefore, God, so to say, asked that the Jewish people should bring atonement for embarrassing the moon. Al elas atamim, on the offering of the additional burnt offering, kol karban hazeh, this all was brought besides the daily offering. Beniskai, and its libation does not refer to the young male goat because the sin offering has no libation. This goes on the oila, on the burnt offerings, but not on the sin offering. A sin offering did not have a libation. And that completes the Chumash of the day. We now go to the Tanya of the day. We're in the middle of chapter 14. Alter Rebbe is teaching us the spiritual, the Kabbalistic concept of tshuva.
How about chapter 4?
Chapter 4. What I say?
14.
Okay, Nishkefella. Chapter 4.
Missed by 10 numbers.
Yeah. What's a number? So, when you come to my age, numbers not important. So, we come to chapter 4, and the Alter Rebbe is teaching us an unbelievable teaching in the concept of tshuva, toshuv hey, the returning of the letter hey. And there's two heys in God's name, and therefore you have Yud K is the first letter hey, and you have Vav K, Yud Hey and Vav Hey. So you have two heys. So there's tshuva ilah and tshuva tata. There's a higher level of tshuva and a lower level of tshuva. And the Alter Rebbe is going to explain this difference of tshuva. What is tshuva ilah and tshuva tata? So we're going into the essence. And he ended off yesterday with the question of that you have to really understand tshuva. We have to understand what the sin is. What is the real concept of a sin? If the concept of the sin is punishment, which we find, therefore the question is asked, if it's punishment, we find that the Torah says that there's a punishment of death, God forbid, by God. And the punished by death by God usually means that a person, chas v'shalom, passes away before the age of 60. And we find many people have done these sins, and they're living past, Baruch Hashem, the age of 60. So, therefore, we really need to understand what the concept of the real aspect of sin and the real concept of its punishment. So we're going to go into this. We're going to understand this according to what it's written. The Pasuk says, for God's people, God's people are part of God. It's an interesting expression. That God is the people of the Jewish people are part of the Eibush. What does that mean? So, according to Chassidus, it means because it's in a neshama. Every Jew has a neshama. Has within him a godly soul that's a part of God. So that means, in a simple meaning, is chelik mishem havaya baruch hu. Because the neshama is part of the four names of part of the four letters of God's name. And that's why, if you understand this concept, the Alter Rebbe said this in the beginning of chapter 2 of Tanya. The Zohar writes, thus describing God's infusion of a soul into a body of Adam Arishan. It's written, and he blew within his nostrils a soul of life. So there we see that the Eibishter Pasha put within everybody a soul. He gave him a soul. And what is the meaning that God gave a soul to every person? Man de Nafach, the Zohar writes, when somebody, the Zohar comments, the one who blows, this is what we mentioned in the second chapter of Tanya, does from within him. What does it mean that a person blows? He takes a deep breath from within him. The metaphor of blowing signifies that the soul of a Jew originates in the innermost aspect of godliness. What is the innermost aspect of godliness? If you want to explain in a simple way, what is the most inner aspect of godliness? That's God's name, Yud Kei Vav Kei. God has 7 names, and the most precious name, which we don't even say, is Yud Kei Vav Kei. The name of God, Yud Hey Vav Hey, which symbolizes, as it's brought down, he is and he was and he will be all at once, which is it's called the tetragram, which is the name of God, which symbolizes Oid Ein Sof, an infinite concept. Right? So the blowing, the metaphor signifies a soul originates. The tetragram, as you'll soon be explained. So even though when you want to say the essence of God, you're not allowed to put God in any kind of dimension. So how do you say God comes in with Yud Kei Vav Kei even? Because that's already a name. So even the Yud Kei Vav Kei is already a name. And we know how this name was said in the Beis Hamikdash. So it is a name. It's the name of God. It's one of the 7 names of God, Yud Kei Vav Kei. So how then is it possible to say God blew within him a part of himself? Nevertheless, even though this is a hard thing to comprehend, but the Torah speaks in the language of men. So that's the way it is. The Torah talks in an anthropomorphical way. By way of analogy, there exists a vast difference in the case of mortal man. Al derech mashal bein a hevel. It's a big difference between the hevel, the breath of his mouth. It's a big difference the way, because everything when you speak with your breath. So with your breath comes through the articulation of your 5 things of your mouth that gives about the breath, that takes the breath and forms it into one of the miraculous concepts that it's formulated through the mouth, through the palate of the mouth, and the tongue, and the teeth, and the lips, etc. That create this take the hevel, take the breath, and turn it into words. But then you have the hevel itself. When you take a deep breath, when a person needs to, we should never know if something does when you can't breathe. So you have to take a jog or whatever. Even regular people, they have a shorter breath. So that is the breath. That's not nothing to do with speaking. That's a breath. That's hard. Sometimes it's hard to take a breath. You lose your breath. That's a whole different world. That's when your lack of breath. That's when you feel the importance, the essence of breath. What really breath is. So even though breath, it comes about through speech, there's no comparison between the speech and when you take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. To somebody who blows. Because when you talk and your breath comes through speech, it's very small. That's why a person can talk and talk and talk and talk and talk and talk. Seemingly, some people never lose their breath when they talk. So they can talk and talk and talk and never miss a beat. Why? Because even though it comes from your breath, so why don't you ever lose your breath? Because it's a very little amount of breath. It's not extremely to the essence of where your lungs are going to its essence to give breath. And therefore, in Kabbalah, the metaphor is b'chitzainis. It's an outer expression of breath. From the aspect of soul that dwells within this breath. But when the breath is issued, when he blows forcefully, when it comes from the depths of himself, and he takes a deep breath. Oh, there you see the inner breath. There's where you see the person loses his breath. Because it comes from his essence, comes from the most inner part of his body. It comes from the most strongest part of the life force of the vivifying soul, of the soul that gives him life. So therefore, going back to the wording of the Zohar in the beginning over here, man de nafach mitaychei nafach. The Zohar is explaining the pasuk by Yifach be'apav nishmas chaim. He blew with it. Why is the pasuk? That's the pasuk in the Torah. By Yifach be'apav. The Zohar is explaining the verse when it talks about the creation of the soul that was put in man. It says, the verse says, when it talks about creation, it says, Asara Mamaras, 10 words, the world was created. The Eibishter said it, and it was created. That's speech. So the world was created through speech. Then, when it comes to the soul, the pasuk changes itself. It doesn't say he created the soul through speech. It says, Vayipar ba'apav. It doesn't even say he created the soul. That's why it's a chelik lekam and mal mamish. It's almost not a created entity. So it comes from the essence of God. So it's not created. That's also you have to realize, number one. But number two is, it says, by Yipar Be'ap, it's a whole different expression when it comes to the creation, because everything has a soul. I mean, you can ask that same question. Everything has, even an animal has a soul. But the Torah does not, you see, an animal is created alive with the soul in it. When it comes to man, the Torah separates between the soul of the physical body, so to say, because it says he created man through the earth, and then the pasuk says he formed the body, and then the pasuk says, it's in Genesis, Vayipach ba'apav, and he blew into his nostrils a soul of life. So Vayipach ba'apav, the Zohar says, the man did nafach. That when if somebody blows, he blows from within him. So the Torah expressed that the neshama of the body, the soul, the godly soul of the body, is blown within man, a whole different concept. It comes from the essence of God. It comes from his inner. Just like, again, Torah talks the way human talk. That's the general rule, that the Torah speaks in the language of men, so we should comprehend. There's a big difference between the creation of the world and the creation of a godly soul. The creation of the world comes through speech. The creation of a godly soul comes more through the inner aspect of godliness. And therefore, it's a whole different ball game, so to say. It's a whole different reality. And that's why we started off in the beginning of Tanya, with the Alter Rebbe says, Nefesh Hashenis B'Yisrael, the second soul of a Jew, is a chelik elakal memam. It's a very interesting expression. That's a chelik elakad. It's a statement in the Medrash that it's a part of God. What does that mean? And now Alter Rebbe is explaining it. What it means, a chelik elakah. What it means is a part of God. It's Yud Kei Vav Kei. It's part of God's name. And it's part of God's infinite name, the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei, which shows on God's infinity, which is God's essence, so to say, because you can't really put God's essence in a name. So it's an analogy, so to say. Therefore, we put it to the highest name of God, Yud Kei Vav Kei. Well, actually, it's brought down. The Alter Rebbe says many times, Hashem, it's even higher than the name of God. Self-understood, it comes from the essence of God. But in the way we're going to talk, in the human talk, even a Kabbalistic human talk, we're going to connect this soul to the tetragram, to the name of God of Yud Kei Vav Kei, which is the name of God, which shows on a level which is hard for even us to comprehend, past, present, and future at the same time. So that's why it's above creation, because creation, when we want to talk about something that's above creation, we talk about that name of God. Because that name of God alone symbolizes something that's above time and space. Everything else, every other name of God and everything else is all within creation. So once you're within creation, you're within time and space, and everything has its time and everything has its space. But in the name of God, Yud Kei Vav Kei is the name of God, which symbolizes godliness, which is above time and space. So that's a whole different level than that's before creation. That's before the concept of creation. But that is still in the name, that still has a name. So therefore, really, we're going even higher than that name. But at least to comprehend this concept within the analogy of Torah, to comprehend it in a more of a comprehensive way, we can talk about the way the neshama is a chelik elakah, is a part of God. Chelik Hashem Amay is connected to Yud Kei Vav Kei, to the tetragram of God's name, which is symbolic to is, was, and will be, and at the same time. And that's why, in general, the name Yud Kei Vav Kei is a very powerful name of God, and that's why we don't say it. We say Adonai, which is Lord, but we don't say God's name. It was only said in the Beis Hamikdash, in the temple, with the Kohen, Kehanim, the Kohen Gadol, etc. And we'll have to merit that Mashiach will come, and we'll again be able to say that name of God in a very very natural or verbal kind of a way. Okay, but that ends the Tanya of the day. We're still in the middle of the thought. It's going to be an interesting concept in Chassidus, which will answer a lot of questions that we have. Today is the 19th day of the month. Today is the 19th day of the month. Yep. Which is chapter 90 to chapter 96. If you do chapter 90 to chapter 96, in Tillim, you do the Chitas of the day. I invite you all at 10 o'clock, with an hour and a half. We're going to have a Tanya class, have a class in the portion of the week. Either you come to Chabad or on the Zoom number or on Torah Direct. And 10 a.m., we'll learn again a beautiful interpretation of the Rebbe on the portion of the week. Wish you all a beautiful and happy day. See you tomorrow, 8 o'clock. Continue to learn the Chitas of the day.